All right, so Richard, you always come with some very interesting perspective. You're a bit of a contrarian on this one. You say those reports, you believe they're misguided, I should say. You think Apple's going to go a different direction. But let's start off with the report. Why do you think that Anthropic and OpenAI are not the right picks?
Well, I don't know that it's misguided. I think Apple made it very clear at the WWDC that they would open their platform to frontier models. So what they choose to integrate into Siri, you can imagine, is going to be a range of models. And Apple is incredibly sensitive about hallucinating in their models. They don't want to have bad quality results from something as important to the company as Siri.
All right, Richard, take a sip of some water really quick. We've all been there, early mornings, the throat's getting a little tight. Take a quick sip. I want to talk about your other thesis here. Go ahead, take a sip, catch your breath for a sec.
No, good. I'm good.
I want to talk about your other thesis, the fact that you think that Apple's going to do a tie-up with Alphabet. And you think that makes a lot of sense. And we teased it. You say there's 20 billion reasons, obviously alluding to the search payments that Alphabet makes to Apple.
Absolutely. So Apple clearly needs to replace a $20 billion hole in its P&L if the DOJ turns around and says Apple cannot be paid by Google for default search in Safari. Google, on the other hand, needs to get very broad distribution for Gemini. They need that to go to the 1.3 billion endpoints that are on Apple devices. And Apple clearly needs RAG, Retrieval Automated Generation, a truth set, a source of truth behind Siri that delivers the kind of actual results that you come to expect from Google search. So these two companies, we know from all the stuff that came out in the DOJ trial, are very closely aligned. They have worked together for years. There's been money flowing between them. There's technology flowing between them. And indeed, Apple is one of the largest customers of Google Cloud. So there are already a lot of connections between these two companies. I'm not saying that they will use Gemini exclusively, but it would make a very logical partner for Apple to work with Google.
All right, that's a very interesting thesis. So you say, I think the key part of that is once the DOJ situation is resolved, how confident are you that it's going to be resolved in a favorable way for Alphabet and Apple? And also, I have to ask you, is there any political risk in there? I mean, the president's been very critical of Tim Cook still building in India, has mentioned him several times in less than positive ways. Is there any political risk of this administration's DOJ doing something to stop that from actually happening?
So let's set aside the political risk, which is about manufacturing and what Apple does in its software stack and its end services. And I think one thing that Apple has been very good at with its services is creating utilities that customers use every day. Apple Pay, iCloud, things like that. Now, in terms of the DOJ outcome, whatever is going to happen, it's almost certain that Google will appeal. There may be some injunctions and restrictions on Google's behavior. And Apple already tried to intervene and said, hey, we still want to get paid, so how can you tell us who to select as our search partner? But I think you're waiting until after that decision hits until you then see some sort of new deal between the two companies. And it may be just that Gemini is one of the partners added to Apple's roster of offerings that they support through Apple Intelligence.
All right, Richard, let me ask you one last question. We're talking about deals. I'm looking at the valuation of Perplexity, about $12 billion, according to Forge Global. I'm looking at the valuation of Anthropic, about $64 billion, according to Forge Global. Why doesn't Apple just buy both and just sort it out later?
First of all, I think you know, Frank, that Apple is a company that has been almost entirely built on organic growth. It's done almost no acquisitions. It's just not the nature of the company to go and try to buy in technology. They like to control their software stack and control their ecosystem. So I don't think it's in their nature. Second, Perplexity is a very small company with very little underlying tech. I don't think that's the kind of company Apple would be looking to buy. I think, if anything, they will use the ecosystem that they have and the 1.3 billion endpoints and iPhones that they have as an attractive a meeting point, if you will, for a company to do a deal. And I think you can see also Apple is extremely sensitive to corporate governance. That's, I think, why Phil Schiller didn't join the board of OpenAI, and they didn't do a bigger deal back when that was rumored about a year and a half ago.